What's up, everybody? Do you sometimes like to watch a TV show or maybe read a book with Fabio on the cover? And people, you might describe it as a guilty pleasure. Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we're going to be talking about why are pleasures guilty, if they are at all. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
So, Danny, I had this experience this week where I have a quote unquote guilty pleasure. I've been watching Columbo. Like, man, do I love this show. And I love it so much
Yeah.
because he's just, everybody thinks he's an idiot and he totally plays into it and he totally solves every crime because he basically manipulates the people by them thinking that he's an idiot and him fulfilling their thoughts. So, I just love watching it. I get a kick out of it. And I was about to describe it to somebody as, oh, this is my guilty pleasure. And then I was thinking to myself, why does this have to be guilty? Like, I don't feel guilty about this. I feel really good when I can actually have some time in
Yeah.
my day to watch this show. And it's a pleasure, but it's not a harmful pleasure. It's something that I'm learning from and that I enjoy. So that got me to thinking, why are pleasures guilty and why do we call them guilty pleasures?
Yeah. Why even define them that way? No, you know what I mean? It is funny because it's always like things that are like we always describe things that way that are generally speaking not really that bad. It's not like you're talking about you know, um, I don't know, like hiding, getting high or something, or doing something that's like harmful to you, maybe to others. It's usually things that are pretty like innocuous and simple and whatever. I remember when I used to drive a lot all the time. I don't know why, but I used to love when Avril Lavigne came on the radio. And like, I don't necessarily listen to her music regularly, but like driving, I love it. I don't know what it was about it, but something, but it was like, that's like a guilty pleasure too. I don't know what it is.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know. I always thought of because it is funny. Because why should anything that's pleasurable be guilty if it's something we really like and really is, really like makes us happy or makes us joyful?
Yeah. And then and it's also like calling it a guilty pleasure makes you almost feel a little bit defensive or shameful around
Yeah.
it. Like when I was thinking of Columbo as like guilty pleasure, I was thinking I was some creep in like a raincoat, like like about to expose himself or something. I was like, it's not that, it's just a TV show.
I like to hang out in parks. No, it's yeah, you gotta like it's funny because you're right. You feel like you have to like if you want to talk like you want to talk about it, but then you feel like you have to first justify it and like explain it and rationalize it. But why? Why should you have to? And it's funny because
Mm.
there are also things that like usually it's stuff that a lot of people also like. It's not like, we're not talking about like Columbo is a show that's well known. It's not a show that was like had low ratings or anything. It was on for a long time. So it's kind of funny, I think, in that sense too. And I wonder what it is about them that makes it a guilty pleasure rather than just something pleasurable. Or why do we do you think it's because like is it social condemnation or judgment? Is that what it is? Is it like saying
I
that
think
you're the type of person that shouldn't like that, but even though you do?
I think it's kind of like that bromance type of word. Like how girls get jealous when guys are very close friends and they're like, "Oh, bromance." It's like people get jealous when you actually enjoy something
Yeah,
and you're getting pleasure from something simple and they're like, "Oh, that's your guilty pleasure, huh?" It's like
because
maybe
you're
some type
happy.
of jealousy. Yeah. Yeah, maybe some jealousy in there.
We should ruin that for. Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be. It could be jealousy, might be, or like that you let I think it might also be like maybe they're jealous that you let yourself really enjoy it, and they would like to enjoy it too, but because of whatever
Hmm.
self concepts they have, whatever problems they have, they won't allow themselves to.
Hmm.
I'm thinking of like like that. When people talk about like toxic masculinity and that kind of whatever, like so thinking of yourself a certain way and thinking certain things are just totally out of bounds, even though like you might
Mm.
be the type of person that would want to do that anyway, but you don't let yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that brings a question. Are there actually pleasures that should make you feel guilty? It's like it's tough because we're these organisms that are just like we're moved through life by pleasure and pain. We try and avoid pain, we try and go towards
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it can be detrimental. Like I've gone to excess with some pleasures and
Oh
that
hell
can be
yeah.
like
Yeah.
detrimental because especially when it's like a short-term pleasure that's very, very satisfying, where but it'll give you a long-term pain. But the long-term pain, because it's not close
It's not present.
temporally,
Yeah,
yeah, it does. You don't feel it. So like, yeah, I've been guilty of that.
I've
Um,
definitely been guilty of that too, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's like, why? I guess like, why do we need to be guilty about
Well, you
these?
know what? Yeah, and guilt's a funny word too, because guilt is like a social concept, right? Like you're conditioned. I mean, first of all, guilt's something you're conditioned to feel. It's not something that you feel normally. Our conscious doesn't tell us like we're doing something wrong normally unless we were taught that it's wrong. So there is this, it's gotta be, it's connected to something about society. Maybe it is,
Mhm.
maybe it is like, those things like were, especially I'm thinking too, like, like when you're younger and you're trying to fit in like in high school or whatever, right? Because everybody's desperately trying to fit in at that time. You have the groups that you're trying to fit in with, and oftentimes it's fairly clear like what's accepted and what's not, like within that group. So if you like things that are not part of what's accepted in the group that you're trying to sort of or take or join, that would be things that you're going to hide, right? So
Mm.
the things you
Mhm.
might feel guilty about, maybe that kind of idea.
Ooh, that does make a lot of sense. Yeah, definitely. Because I think of examples. There's one guy that I knew growing up who like he literally didn't care what anybody else thought. Like it never even occurred to him to even give like an inch of consideration to what anybody else thought. And so like he would do this stuff that like would be guilty pleasures or like most people would condemn or condone or criticize or whatever. And he just didn't care. Like it didn't matter to him. He's like, yeah, I don't give a shit. Like this is something that I enjoy doing. You go and
To do
but
it.
it was like everybody had such respect for him because he just cared about himself. Like he didn't care about what other people thought. They could criticize him all day and he would just be like, go F yourself. But yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because that's the confidence, I think, and knowing yourself. Because I think that's the other problem is like a lot, like most people are uncomfortable with themselves or don't know themselves fully or just are unsure. They want to be accepted, they want to be liked. And so, like, I think a lot of people are constantly doing things to kind of not for themselves necessarily, but for their image, to project to society a certain idea, to be accepted, all these other things. And that kind of complicates things. If you're comfortable with yourself and you know yourself and you're just doing what you want to do, I mean, why do you have to prove it to anybody else? Why do you need anybody else to accept it? Like if something's
Hmm.
really pleasurable to you, like who cares? Like really, why do you need the world to say it's okay?
Probably because for hundreds of thousands of years we grew up in very close, tight-knit societies
Yeah,
where your
yeah, that's
survival
why.
depended upon everybody else's support. And now it's like
Yeah,
we still our lives still depend on other support, but our survival doesn't. Like our survival is almost guaranteed. The baseline is so low.
yeah. It's funny too because I also always thought of them like I think sometimes too. I mean, I guess guilty. That idea of guilty pleasure it has like multiple meanings, like everything else. I always thought of it in some senses like you know things that you find really joyful, but like maybe you don't have a good reason why. They're just kind of whatever, or they're just entertaining, but they're not intellectual or they're not like normal for you. They're just it's like maybe like like think of a genre of music. Like you might not like an entire genre of music, but like some person you do like their stuff for whatever reason. And so it's like
Hmm.
you might say it's like a guilty pleasure. Like, generally, you don't like that kind of stuff. But this you do. Maybe something like that. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
it I actually think it's really important to have a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Like it's because I can't speak for everybody, but I know like me personally, I'm so busy like working so hard to accomplish these goals and do all these things that it's just like it's the times when I get to sit down and watch an episode of Columbo, it's like very savory. It's like cherished time because
Yeah.
it's just, it's literally just like a little bit of pleasure out of the day, just me, and just like awesome.
Well, it's funny. I actually got into not that long ago because my partner she watches anime and like I got into it because she watches it, but like it's like a great thing because we're both really busy and it's like fun to watch at night. It's not taxing. It's not like, watching like a lot of these like drama shows and stuff that like they take a lot out of you. They're like emotional and they're like serious and stuff. This is like light and fun and like, and it's almost like I like that about it because it's, you're not, it doesn't require a ton from you. You know what I mean? It's just enjoyable. And it doesn't have to be like, highbrow or anything or like, smart, it could just be fun. And I think
Hmm.
that's the other side of it too. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it's smart because I think it's like, it's allowing yourself just to feel pleasure, right? With no real strings attached.
Hmm.
Maybe that's why it's guilty. Maybe because it's like, there's nothing. Maybe that's also why, because it's like you're just experiencing pleasure without any real work or any real effort.
I was just thinking of like a Craigslist post, like looking for pleasure, NSA.
No strings attached, baby. Just do
Yeah.
it. Uh, Maybe that's it too. I don't know. Because like then, yeah, because then it's just pleasurable. There's nothing else, right? Because a lot of most other pleasures, like we feel like we have to work for them. Like you have to do,
Hmm.
you have to earn your time to do the things you want to do, or
Hmm.
you have to set time aside to do it because of every other stupid responsibility. It's like maybe that's like because it's just easy.
Isn't that a dumb mentality? Like
Yes.
you look back, I mean, if we started in the Garden of Eden, we just had pleasures all around us.
Yeah.
And if we didn't start there, still like we were outside in nature and it was beautiful. And sure, there were times that were stressful, but for the most part, it was beautiful. And we had these great bodies that we
It
could do
definitely
whatever
wasn't
with.
stressful. He was walking around with like his thing just out, chilling. There
I
was no
know.
stress. Not then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I was also thinking about like what's the opposite of a guilty pleasure? So like there's kind of two ways to look at it. It would be like a non-guilty pleasure, or it would be a guilty pain. And so what would those things be? And are those things good for you or bad for you?
I don't know what a guilty pain would look like.
I think when I think of a guilty pain, I thought of it one of two ways. So like it's either going to be good for you or bad for you. So like a guilty pain that's bad for you would be something like cutting yourself or something like that because it feels
Okay.
good in the moment,
Oh,
but in the
oh,
long
okay,
run it's
yeah.
probably not that good. But and plus there's shame associated with it. You hide it from other people, you don't tell anybody what's going on. So like
Yeah.
I was thinking that if it was bad, or I was thinking guilty pain because we were talking about how guilty pleasures can help you kind of move forward uh if they're not harmful. So like I was thinking guilty pains as like some of these people who like we'll just like use the entrepreneur example, like somebody who has such a firm goal of getting somewhere that their guilty pain is actually cold calling people, like calling up people they don't know and trying to sell them whatever. And for 8 years they're doing this and they're not making any progress, but they're just building up the experience. They're getting better and better and better at it. That's their guilty pain because it's painful every time, but that guilt is like they're not telling anybody about it, but that guilt and that pain is eventually getting them to a place where they want to be.
Ah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I can see both of those too because I think on the one hand you're right, like things that are like like if people like I don't know are depressed or negative and like but they also perpetuate the attitude themselves. That's like a guilty pain sort of, right? And like you might even hide the fact that you're causing it or even deny that you're doing it, right? And on the flip side, right, like kind of putting yourselves through these difficult things just to kind of try to make that progress and even enjoying it maybe sort of to a certain extent. Yeah, I could see that. We are weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, like I don't know why I was thinking about this the other day, but like it's just funny because like I don't know if it's amazing to me sometimes that like we collectively accept the world as it is. Not the world like, reality, I mean, but like the human construct, the world that we've created, societies, that we accept them the way they are, like blows my mind. That we like
Mm-hmm.
accept this. And it's like I don't know, it's just funny, like because it just seems like we do all these things not for our own reasons, but for or not because we even want to, but for status, because we have to, or because like we don't want to lose, you want to
Mm-hmm.
win, and like all these other reasons
Yeah.
that are kind of very, very abstract and apps or not really part of us, outside of us.
Yeah. I think part of it comes down to like so much of everything already being created before we get started.
Yeah,
Like, wouldn't it make a huge difference if everything had to just be reduced to rubble every like 50 years or every 100 years?
that'd be
Because you
so
look
fun.
around, you see these giant buildings and you see like these like massive computer companies and like all this stuff that's like so massive it makes you feel insignificant. Whereas
Yeah,
like really, if you just try, who knows? You could be the next big thing. You never know.
I think you definitely could. That's the thing, right? It's like it would be interesting if we did destroy everything like every 50 years or so. That'd be really keep what's good and then start around the
Like
rest.
I always found it so interesting. Like when did things go awry? Because in the Bible it talks about how they would forgive debt every 7 years, and how like it was I think it was the Israelites couldn't even uh they couldn't even give debt to an Israelite. So like
No.
you couldn't someone one of your own people you couldn't give them debt. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like
Yeah,
that,
yeah. Like
and
there's
it
like
was
things
just
like
like
you can't collect interest on a loan and stuff. Like it has to be just whatever was borrowed paid back exact or whatever. Like it
yeah.
can't be any extra. Yeah,
and
it's weird.
and tax collectors actually had to have physical people go around and collect the taxes, and their lives were in danger because you know.
Now I
So
could just
like,
be like, nope.
when did things go so wrong?
I don't know. I don't know. It's like I think the bureaucratic institution got too much power. Maybe that's it. It
Yeah.
became such a big facet. I don't know, it's weird. Well, you know what's so much? You know, it's funny too because back then there's so many people were really like their work was really focused on like sustenance, like food and stuff. But that all
Hmm.
changed with like big agriculture and stuff like that, where like one person and a bunch of machines can farm half of America. It's like so then that's a lot of people that don't have that job anymore.
Hmm. All of a
You
sudden,
know,
you have time for guilty pleasures.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like it is interesting that when you analyze, I think anything, like the words we use, the ideas we have, anything. I mean, they're all somehow rooted in our culture and what we've learned. And I think how we apply them can be really harmful or helpful, depending on, how you look at it. Like I think if you think of guilty pleasures as something really like guilty, you're gonna hide them, and that's probably not healthy because if you really enjoy it, you should just admit that it's a pleasure and
Hmm.
enjoy it.
Yeah. So I guess like, but we should evaluate our pleasures, because pleasures can be very good for you if they're directed in the right way, but they can also be very harmful if they're directed in the wrong way. So instead of
Oh
just like
yeah.
labeling them guilty pleasures or not guilty pleasures, it's probably important to determine, is this pleasure getting me somewhere where I want to go? Or is this pleasure taking me off course?
I think that's a good way to look at it in like the larger context. Like how does this pleasure fit in with my life, my values? Like is it detrimental to my moving forward or to other things? Because it's like video games is a great one. Like, all right, we both like video games a lot, but there's plenty of people who like them way too much and get like addicted to it. And then, I mean, anything can become an addiction where, your life suffers because you're putting all of your time into something, but you're not getting a return that's beneficial to you or enough of a beneficial return to count the negatives. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, talking about addictions. Okay. So I mentioned this book that I read, Loving What Is, and I think it's a really interesting book because it teaches you to question your thoughts. And so there was an experience that I had where I felt almost addicted to something. And it was because I had this thought in the background that my happiness depends on this thing.
Oh, yeah. I can see that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't see that thought. Like it was back here, but it was running everything. It was like my happiness depends on this.
Yeah.
And so like my mind was going forever because I was imagining all these scenarios where I'd lose that thing and then I'd never have happiness again.
I think it's a
And
pretty good characterization of diction, though. Yeah. Yeah. Because,
yeah,
that idea that, you know, that thing becomes sort of a condition for everything else or for your very happiness or for your very existence or whatever, comfort, however you want to define it. Yeah.
yeah. So loving what is kind of like a four-step questioning thing where you ask, is it true? Could you know it's absolutely true? And like looking at it, I was like, well, no, I can't know that's true 100%.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, what happens when you believe that thought or that idea? And like I saw that when I was thinking that thought, like I just my life was there was like no possibility left in my life. It was crippling, it was crushing, it was just like very, very not just didn't feel good at all. And then it's like, well, what would it be like if you didn't have that thought? And I was like, ah, I would be free. I wouldn't care. Like it wouldn't even matter. And so like, but like helping to see that thought and then see the cause and effect of that thought really helped to release some of the addiction around it. And so,
Oh.
yeah.
No, that's a good, I like that. That's a good point too, because I think that's one of the hardest things with like, whatever you're addicted to. It's hard to see it for what it is a lot of times, I think. And it's hard to see that it's harmful. It's also hard to see that it's like a lot of times it's like it's not like really pleasure. Like it might be pleasurable, but it's more like escapism and stuff like that. Not really like enjoyment or genuine pleasure. I don't know if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's hard to also, see a way around it because it can be so consuming. Like just dealing with that can feel like you're, taking up all your time, and then the rest of your time is spent rushing through what you need to get through, that you leave yourself no time to think, no time to really be free, like you said, to make free decisions, to live your life.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think pleasures can definitely like, also rob us of our freedom, and that's where they get severely, detrimental to us too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think overall guilty pleasures, don't worry too much about them. Go watch some episodes of Columbo.
350 Shades of Grey.
Yeah. Or there's a new 365 on Netflix that I've heard is really same
What
thing.
is that?
It's
Oh,
basically
is it
like
like
porn.
Spanish?
It's like porn on
Yeah,
Netflix. Yeah.
yeah.
Two two girls already have told me how good it is. So
Yeah, it's funny. It's like it cracks me up how much it's like how obvious it is used to sell things too. Because like I remember when Game of Thrones came out on HBO, and I had read the books that were out at the time. And like the first season, I was like, oh cool, I'll check it out. And like the first season was like really close to the book, but I like within the first episode, I was like, dude, there was not this many scenes in whorehouses, and what is going on? And I was like
yeah.
they do all their business in there now. I didn't know that. Like they have meetings and stuff, and like it's just
Yeah.
background noise to everything they do.
Yeah. Dude, it's crazy.
It's so funny.
Yeah. I remember there's this like enlightened Eastern master called Osho, and he always used to talk about how we're just so deprived of sex like all the time that it it makes it like our
Yeah.
biggest priority in life. He would always talk he would talk about number one how like you should just people should just grow up naked around each other and just it should just be normal. But he would always talk about how uh religious people would always ask him about sex and sex workers would always ask him about religion.
The thing you don't have in your life, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You remind me though of it's funny though, because like, we mentioned like 50 Shades of Grey and like even like Game of Thrones. Like I think that's also funny about what we define as guilty pleasures. Like 99%, there's nothing different between it and something everybody's watching. There really isn't. It's just that like maybe it's like it was really popular a couple years ago, or maybe it was, you know what I mean? Like it's just funny how it's really there's no difference. Like, why aren't those things also guilty pleasures? I think ask yourself that too, because that kind of can put it into perspective as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
so
All
funny.
right. So there you
Yeah,
have it in a nutshell. Are pleasures guilty? Should they be? Should they not be? And other questions answered in today's
stop.
episode of the Existential Stoic podcast. Make sure to check us
Later,
out on YouTube and the podcasting services. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Randy.